We're going to be going through a number of things today. The first of which is the title for this webinar, where we'll be optimizing the Microsoft Cloud Access for the public sector. We'll be going through a number of pieces of information today that are around how Okta can collaborate with Microsoft-based technologies, how we can work with those, and how we can provide you additional functionality on top of what they are already provided. So the first thing I wanted today was to actually introduce who everyone is on this call, and of course give you an idea of who's going to be presenting, and then we'll be seeing some demonstrations later in some videos around some of the functionality that we can provide here at Okta. So if I skip ahead into who's presenting today, the first person you'll see there is myself. I am an Associate Alliances Solutions Engineer here at Okta, providing support to all of our partners and our customers across the UK and Ireland region. And then passing over to Mark and the others to introduce themselves too.
Hi, I'm Mark Southam, Senior Solutions Engineer for Okta. I've been here about 2 years now. And I'm going to be speaking to you about some of our Microsoft integrations today. Giuseppe.
Good morning, everyone. Giuseppe Damiano, Cybersecurity Pre-Sales Engineer at Byte Software Services, and I'll be taking you through a particular case scenario, and I'll be presenting a demonstration of one of the particular uses of the Okta solution. Gennaro.
Morning, everyone. So Gennaro Miaccio, I'm one of the cybersecurity pre-sales specialists here at Byte, and today I'll be taking us through a demonstration of the movers and levers process.
Fantastic. So thank you everyone for introducing yourself there. And as I said, we'll be seeing some number of demonstrations later, ranging from HR as a master, some additional functionality provided by Okta, whether that be workflows, and the likes of a number of other solutions as well. So giving you more detail around what we'll be talking about today and how this is all relevant to organizations in the public sector. We'll be looking at a number of different topics today, of which how we can work with the Microsoft-based technologies out there. But of course, why are we talking about this today, and why is this something that's becoming more and more relevant, especially this week with the further announcements that have been made? As you know, we are all working from home at the moment, as you may be finding yourself. More and more so, this is becoming more common within the industry. And of course, this did happen overnight earlier in the year, taking us all by surprise when that did occur. Now, when this occurred straight away overnight, a lot of people were taken by surprise. We weren't expecting it to happen. And of course, with this not being expected by our employees, you can only imagine the surprise to the IT departments within each of our organizations in the UK and Ireland as well. And of course, this brought to light a number of different things to our organizations, a lot of them bad, but at the same time, this did accelerate the adoption of other technologies that we would involve in our organizations going forward. One of which, organizations were not prepared for this change overnight. Who would be? Who would be prepared for something that drastic overnight when it was something that we maybe were working towards over the coming months or years, but all of a sudden it happened within 12 hours as soon as that was announced in the evening on that date earlier in March. And of course, from this, we've had to change the way we've been working, and we needed to provide a different way of working for our employees, because they're now working from their own homes, potentially using their own devices, depending on the organization involved in that, and expecting to use technologies or applications that they've never used before. So you can only imagine the friction provided or presented here by employees because of this new way of working and the new learning that needs to be done to be able to use those different applications the way they're now set up to work. Now, of course, the challenges faced here included things such as VPNs. I had a number of my own friends that had problems using VPNs, with now 90% of the organization using them to access the information they required to actually do their work, because the organization was not expecting this to happen overnight, of course. The other things that also happened were collaboration. Collaboration was a huge issue, and we'll go into a bit more detail later as to how we have gone from having our own in-person meetings to suddenly doing this over Zoom or whatever it may be, Teams, the likes of that, for doing these meetings within your organization. Of course, this was not something that was done frequently before, as often it was done in person. And then, of course, another problem that was surfaced during this whole crisis was the increase in spear phishing attacks. a lot of people within organizations were put through a steep learning curve for the applications they were using going ahead and the different access they would now be using to be able to do their job. So of course, anybody reaching out with these emails to do these phishing attacks was taking advantage of this knowledge that was not known by their employees. But as we've gone on in time, we've been able to educate and provide that information to our employees to get around this. The other problems we've seen, or shall we say the other shifts that have occurred within our distributed workforce, the challenges that we faced, have included a number of these. Now, I'm not going to read these all aloud, but there are a number on here that do come to mind and probably are more relevant in different points as they are to each of your organizations. Of course, one to hammer home, as we saw in a previous slide, was VPNs. VPNs have been a technology we've used for years and years, and they've been very reliable. They've done the job we needed to. They are what we use to get within those four walls of the office and basically impersonate ourselves as being in the office and being able to access what we needed to do our job. Now, as we saw this shift in the perimeter overnight, and 90% or more than 90% of our workforces within organizations were suddenly having to work from home, we faced a huge problem with the reliability of these VPNs, or potentially the applications we want to access were not actually allowing that to happen. So of course, there was a huge shift in perimeter, and this was because we were working from home, and this working from home approach not only became a working from home approach, but also a working from anywhere, allowing our employees to work from any location they wanted to, maybe because their family were located in a different country or a different place in our own country, therefore allowing them to continue to work, but also be in the presence of family during this crisis, which was quite a scary time for many of us during this. But of course, a positive user experience was something that you can see as one of the points on here, which was a problem or a challenge that we faced during this distribution or allowing our employees to work from home. All of a sudden, we were using many different applications, whether this be the likes of Teams or other end user products that we may be supplying to our employees. And of course, getting our users to have a positive experience of this means that then there will be a good uptake. But of course, if an application is not easy to use or not easy to access, maybe because the VPN is failing or we cannot access an on-premise file share, you can imagine the friction this may cause within our employees and the time that may be lost to the expense of the company for not being able to do our jobs. And that's because IT agility is key. We need to provide new ways of working to our employees, making sure at the same time that they are secure, allowing our employees to have, for instance, maybe a single sign-on experience to those applications, so we don't have to remember dozens and dozens of passwords. Instead, we remember one set of credentials, and when we access certain applications, we can enforce that with another layer of MFA. Or potentially, we may go down the route of adaptive MFA, where we can take behavior detection incorporated into that, so we can determine whether we provide access to a user or maybe deny it, dependent on a number of factors, including where they're working from, the IP address they're working from, maybe the device, or maybe the times of the day that they're actually working at as well. So all of these factors coming into one to determine whether we want to provide access to our applications to our end users. But of course, enabling new ways of working. One way of new working that occurred, especially in our own personal lives, was the collaboration part. We were all of a sudden not allowed to see our own friends and families, or we weren't allowed to go into the office. So we needed to find a new way of doing this, and Teams was that option that came to light, Zoom and the likes of WebEx, other options out there for that video conferencing. And this allowed us to have that next level of collaboration. This is where we can talk about those new ways of working. But at the same time, this is where the shift in the security perimeter also changed as well. These cloud applications no longer required that VPN to access them. Or because of these VPNs being unreliable, we needed to move to a new way of working and provide that access. But at the same time, it wasn't just for our end users, the problem that surfaced, it was also for our administrators as well. And that's where automation became key to eradicating those tedious and repetitive tasks. And we'll go into a bit more detail later as to how we can solve that using a solution that Okta actually has called Workflows. And as I've said to you before, we are looking to provide an alternative to that VPN. So the short term was to enforce a better security around the VPN, whether that be apply an additional layer of multi-factor authentication onto it. As you can see here, we did have a shift in perimeter in our organizations that went from being on-premise, going into the office and working in those four walls, or potentially using that VPN to access the four walls, to being outside of that perimeter and the identity of a user being that new perimeter. And of course, the long-term aim here could be to retire the VPN and adopt a zero trust strategy, whereby we can use the factors of a user and the identity of a user to determine whether we give them access or not. And again, this is what I mentioned earlier around what device a user is using, whether this be a corporate issue device. Maybe we want to manage that. So when a user does access an application, we can put a rule in place that says they can only access this if they're using a corporate issue device. But if they do want to use their own personal device, maybe we give them access to other applications. So having this control, having that zero trust strategy is key here to be able to combat that issue we now face with this shift in perimeter. So these are a few things I wanted to bring up. And of course, now I want to pass over to Mark, who's going to give you a bit more detail on how we actually collaborate with the Microsoft-based solutions out there.
Yes, so I'm going to give you some information about the tools, technologies that our partners and ourselves use to solve critical projects for customers in conjunction with Microsoft technologies, of course. Have I got control here? Yes, I do. So top areas of synergy for Okta and Microsoft customers fall into two categories. One is securing remote work, and the second column is complex identity use cases. So we're going to start off on the left-hand column, beginning with modernizing hybrid IT. So hybrid IT, as I'm sure many of you are aware, gives you a sort of landscape of technologies and platforms that achieve various use cases. We might have our network platforms, maybe a bit of legacy in there, like radius protocols, LDAP. We've got SaaS applications. This was what Okta was certainly born to solve problems around. As in addition to custom apps and APIs, we've got server access or infrastructure access. We need to cater for that as well. And then we've also got on-premise apps that we also need to cater for, so that those legacy applications that were deployed on-prem don't necessarily go away overnight. And then Okta gives you tools to play in all of these areas. So as I said, kind of born to cater for these top two blocks. We've got the MFA components that we can add to these. We actually provide our own LDAP interface as well off the Okta platform. We give some basic tools like credential providers for RDP, PAMs for SSH to sort of augment the security around those legacy approaches. But we also offer a modern approach, which we call advanced server access, where we use an ephemeral certificate, which is a short-lived, tightly scoped certificate to secure access to infrastructure. So that one's, for the most part, targeted at Linux servers and Windows servers deployed in the cloud platforms like Google, G Suite, and Microsoft. But there are use cases where it can be applied to on-premise data centers. So yeah, just keep that in mind. And then on the right here, we introduced a component about a year or so ago now. We call it the Okta Access Gateway, and you'll see it on the next slide here. But ultimately, that's our tool to cater for on-prem apps, and it supports header-based authentication, Kerberos or NTLM authentications. It has URL authorization built in, so you can change levels of access based on different URL suffixes. So that's how we cater for getting back to those on-prem apps. Obviously, there are also integrations with existing infrastructures you may have, such as Citrix. That's a common one, especially in the NHS, as far as I've seen over the past year or so. So yeah, we've got that integration already. This product is predominantly provided to replace existing WAM solutions. So if you do have Oracle Access Managers, CA SideMinders, and the like, then that's primarily where this is targeted at. But obviously, it can cater for more than just that. And now I will, for the second part of securing remote access, we don't want to think about only the access, but also the identity management. And part of that is the next topic, which is HR as a master. So I'll hand over to Giuseppe for this piece.
Thank you very much, Mark. I believe I have control now. So HR as a master is a strategy aimed at addressing the challenge of keeping multiple directories synchronized and up to date without the exponential increase in level of effort and time required to do so. The HR system is likely to be the most accurate in terms of user and department information, so the integration with Okta allows other directory structures the ability to delegate the job of managing those identities to your HR application. In terms of the demonstration, which I've put together for you today, all I've used is an Okta tenant, a SaaS application, a Bamboo HR existing in the form of a SaaS application, and a standard Microsoft Active Directory. All I've done is set up the connection between the Bamboo HR and Okta, and being both those applications SaaS-based, the integration is performed by way of an API. And also then I created a connection, or an integration, if you will, between my Okta tenant and a Microsoft Active Directory structure sitting on a standard Windows 2016 setup as a domain controller. So nothing really out of the ordinary. Without further ado, allow me to roll the tape and show you how the demo goes. In order to demonstrate the HR as a master functionality in this particular lab environment, I have created two users. The first called Pesky Pre-Sales, member of the IT department, and the second called Crafty Sales, member of the sales department. Now, these two users do not yet exist in Okta nor in Active Directory, and I will demonstrate how the integration between these three systems allows for these users and their group memberships to be propagated across all the involved platforms. So we'll begin with Okta via the integration with Bamboo HR. And in this particular case, since I have not scheduled a regular import of users and groups, I will proceed with doing this manually and perform a manual import. So I'll hit the Import Now button and wait for the import task to complete. The import task in Okta from Bamboo HR is now complete, and we can see that there are two new users imported. So let's click OK, and let's investigate whether the two newly created users are now present. Let's start with Pesky, as in Pesky Pre-Sales, and we can see that there's a new user imported. There's no matching Okta user, so let's go ahead and create a new Okta user for this purpose, and we'll do that by ticking the box corresponding to the user and clicking Confirm Assignment. As part of this process, I have also the ability to automatically activate the user, as the user needs to be active if I want it to be replicated across other systems such as Active Directory. Hit the Confirm button, and no error messages are displayed, so the process has completed successfully. I will repeat the process for the Crafty Sales. So tick the box, confirm assignments, check the auto activate box is ticked, and then hit confirm and wait for the process to complete. I will now verify in the Okta directory, in the Okta list of people, that those users have indeed been created and are present in the list. And to do so, I will access directory people, and I will search for Pesky first, and I see the Pesky Pre-Sales user. That's part of the verification. I click on the Pesky Pre-Sales user card, and I want to make sure that the group assigned is correct. And indeed, the group membership within Okta reflects that of Bamboo HR. I will now go ahead and repeat the process for the other user, Crafty Sales. The user indeed exists, and I will repeat the same verification in terms of the group membership. And indeed, Crafty Sales is member of the sales group. So step 1 out of 2 is complete. The next step now is to progress that replication down into
Windows Active Directory. If you remember, when we last checked, there are no pesky pre-sales or crafty sales user currently existing in my Active Directory lists. So I'm going to go ahead and change that, but instead of creating them manually, I will leverage the integration between Active Directory and Okta to do so automatically. So within Okta, I will go into Directory integration, and select my Active Directory. I will then go into push groups, and I will activate a push group for both IT and sales. So I click on the drop-down menu, select push now. You can see that the push task begins, wait for it to complete, and repeat the same step for the sales group. Drop down, push now, wait for the push to complete. And then move over again to the Active Directory list of users and computer, and quite simply perform a refresh of the window. If I've done things correctly, the 2 new users will appear. We have a success. We have a crafty sales user, and if I double click to verify the group membership by accessing the member of tab, I will see that indeed this user is a member of the sales group within Active Directory. So once again, the group membership has been propagated from Bamboo HR to Okta first, and from Okta into Active Directory. I'll repeat the same verification step for the pesky pre-sales user, hitting the member of tab, and once again, I see that the membership is there. This is the end of the HR as a master demonstration, which is also, if you think about it, coincides with the joiner process. Every time a new user joins the company, is hired by the company, it is created in the Bamboo HR, and by way of integration, it's replicated into Okta first and into Active Directory.
Okay, thank you very much for your attention. So this is pretty much a simple demonstration of how to implement these processes. And yes, for the second part of the demo, I will hand the mic over to my colleague, Gennaro.
Perfect, thank you, Giuseppe. And I'm just waiting for some control from James, if that's okay, James.
Yep, you should have that now.
Awesome stuff. So good morning, everyone. And I suppose the next part to this, following on from Giuseppe's demo, we've covered the joiners process, but then it of course begs the question of what happens when a user moves within an organization in terms of in terms of changing roles, as well as what happens when users leave the organization. How does this affect our access? So if I just bring up this video just here. So very similar to Giuseppe's demo. Let's start with on this side. Let's start with the movers process. Oh, thank you very much for that, James. Let's start with the movers process. As mentioned with the HR as a master model, we want to keep all of our identity providers in sync by using the HR system as a single point of truth. So just I'll just skip ahead just a tad here, because I know that was a bit more of an introduction. So very similar to again Giuseppe's video, we'll be using the Bamboo HR application, and again we're going to pick on the pesky pre-sales for this, who, as you can see from here, is currently within the IT department. Now, pesky pre-sales has decided that he wants to join the sales team. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into his record within the HR system. And we're of course going to initiate a change of role and department within that. Now, this being a HR system, we can't just change the records as and when we want. We have to, put this through as a change. So if we just initiate a change request here and change pesky pre-sales into sales and submit this, this will then go to an approver, to approve that change. So this will come up within the inbox shortly. As we can see here, we can now go through and accept this change. So from the HR system perspective, pesky pre-sales has now joined the sales team. What we now want to do is we want to go into Okta and of course replicate those changes from the HR system into Okta's directory. So again, within the Bamboo HR app, we're going to import those users again. And as we can see here, one user has been uploaded and edited. So what we can do is we can go into the Okta's directory, and we can of course confirm this change with pesky pre-sales. So again, this user is still marked as active, and as we go through this, we can see that this user has now been moved into a different group within Okta. Again, this is now going to affect that user's access, so you won't have access to the pre-sale to the IT applications, but more so to the sales applications. Likewise, we also want to make sure that this push is now synchronized to our Active Directory. So again, we're going to initiate a push to our local AD, and that's going to push the changes down. We just quickly bring up the AD console. We can actually go into the pesky pre-sales users account information. And when we check the member of, this user is going to be moved from the IT team into the sales group. So again, affecting the on-premise access that user has. So that's the movers process. Now let's take a bit more of a look of when an employee is leaving an organization. So similar to before, we're going to do this through our HR application, and this time we're going to pick on the crafty salesperson. Again, this user is marked as active within the sales team and is a full-time employee. So let's go into the user's record, and this time we're going to be terminating the user's employment. So if we just go in and change the employment status, and we'll mark this as terminated, of course, give a reason to that. Very similar to before, this has to go through that change process. So this is just a request of change. So we'll fill in all of this information here, submit that across, and again, we'll get a notification shortly in terms of accepting this change. And the change is just coming up now. There we go. So if we just go into there and approve that change, that means this user's been now marked as terminated within our HR system. It doesn't delete the user, but this user has been deactivated and terminated in the background, of course, because of record keeping. But you can see here that the crafty sales member has been removed. Within Okta, let's now quickly run a import from the HR system. And we can actually see here that a user has been removed. However, when we say removed, the user hasn't been completely deleted. So if we go back into the directory of Okta, we can actually, if we look up this user, we'll actually see that the user still exists within our directory, but they've been deactivated. So now they no longer have access to a number of different cloud applications that they would have accessed via Okta. And again, similar on the AD side, if we initiate a very quick import. Now, if we flick back to our Active Directory, we can now just give that a very quick refresh, and you'll be able to see that that user has now been marked as disabled within AD. So again, restricting and stopping the access that they have. We'll just quickly right-click that user just to show that you can enable the account from here. Again, further showing that that account was in fact disabled. We can re-enable the user if we need to. However, as you can see, as soon as you have made a change from the HR system, that's going to replicate across to Okta, that's going to replicate across to Active Directory. And again, that has a direct impact on the access that user has. So in effect, our single point of management is the HR system, and that in effect is the HR as a master model. So that concludes the demonstration of the movers and levers process, when using HR as a master. So thank you very much for watching.
Fabulous. Thanks, Gennaro and Giuseppe. So just to top that off, while HR as a master is a powerful and attractive flow for lifecycle management, i.e. HR-driven IT. It takes a bit of effort from an organization to work out how they want to drive that role-based access. So Okta makes it easy to implement, but an organization has to put the effort in to work out how they want to make it work. So that's the hard part in that kind of project. So still the most common flow is AD to Okta to Office 365. So in the context of working with Microsoft, that's still the most common flow that we see out there. And Okta fully supports that. So Okta can perform lifecycle management to Office 365 in varying ways. So you can choose architectures that support either Office or Okta doing it completely by itself, or combinations of Okta doing some of it and Azure AD Connect doing others. So Okta supports various architectures in the context of LCM with MS. Okay, another good point to make about that sort of lifecycle management integration is that AD integration with Okta can support delegated authentication, does out of the box. And it can also support writebacks, so you can use Okta to drive self-service password reset. So those are another important features around in that area. So onto the sort of second part of the securing remote IT part, and that is working with Microsoft technologies. So obviously very important, and we'll dig into that in a bit more now. So great for Microsoft Tech. Yes, you will start to see over the next few slides that we integrate with all aspects of Microsoft technologies essentially. The bulk of that's driven on the left here, but there's certainly other points where we touch Microsoft Tech on the right-hand side of the slide. And then the first category, or the first slide, is for Windows 10. So using Okta as your identity provider, it helps you maximize the benefits of Windows 10 and enables more extensive identity and access management for thousands of applications, infrastructure, and devices. So Okta supports Windows 10 in 3 key areas: single sign-on, device management, and multi-factor authentication. For single sign-on, Okta supports desktop single sign-on. So we have a couple of ways of doing that these days. One is an integrated Windows authentication agent. That one can be deployed on-prem. Our second approach to that is an agentless version. So that's where we manage that SSO from a cloud-based component. Obviously the most attractive approach these days. And then lastly, we have, or second to last, we have a new feature coming out at the end of the year called FastPass, and that's another alternative to SSO from the Windows desktop. Finally, we've got a browser plugin, so we can do we call it secure web authentication, or SWA for short. It's essentially a password vaulting technique, but the combination of those encrypted credentials that are encrypted in Okta and the browser plugin, which could be an Edge, then you can get a single sign-on-like experience to browser-based apps that don't support federated SSO. So those are the ways we integrate with Windows 10. Also device management. So device management, we can use various MDMs. We have 2 versions of device management now. One's driven by FastPass, the new feature that's coming out. That's certificate based, but the certificates deployed through FastPass and your choice of CA. Could be ADCS, could be the one built into AirWatch, for example, or Workspace ONE, or it could be another provider. The second one is, or the approach now is driven through Windows components. So we deploy an MSI to a Windows desktop. And obviously, you can see the difference between those two is one is the legacy on-premise domain join scenario. The second one is going to be not dependent on that domain. So obviously the more modern, attractive approach. But yeah, certificate-based device authentication, and then MFA. Folks using Windows Hello facial recognition can use it as an additional authentication factor to not only their Windows devices, but to thousands of non-Microsoft apps. So we can use those within our policies, Windows Hello authentication. So our vision for Microsoft integrations is to secure access to every Office 365 resource with Okta and automate Office 365 adoption. So there's two aspects to think about here. One is the lifecycle management, so managing those identities into Office 365 tenants. And the second one is the security of the access around accessing those Office resources. So there are some stats around that. First, for lifecycle management, we can control at least license and role management. That's certainly one aspect of our LCM integration with Office. But we can go deeper than that. As I suggested earlier, we can completely control the LCM flow from AD through Okta into Office 365, or you can use a combination to achieve synergy with Azure AD Connect. And then for security, there are stats that MFA adoption is low. Don't think it's the easiest. They haven't made it the easiest MFA type to use. Okta's always had a user first approach, a user experience first approach to the way it develops and designs things. So that in many cases makes it easier for users to adopt our technologies. And I think MFA is an example of that. So yeah, that's why we think we can help, one area why we think we can help you adopt secure Office access a lot quicker and easier. Windows Autopilot support. So, wrong slide. Here we go. This is very important in this day and age. Now, organizations are finding that they need to ship devices to users at home in the current climate, and Autopilot plays a key part in that experience. So, I do have a video going to show some more detail about it, or a demonstration of it. But Okta supports this. Out of the box, yes, it's fair to say that there is a, if you're using AD credentials to log in as part of an Autopilot flow, when the Office tenant is federated out to Okta, Okta needs to cater for those authentications. But I guess one of the methods that we need to cater for is that username and password evaluation. So I think it was last year or something, we disabled basic authentication by default. So one way to remedy that and make Autopilot work is to re-enable that. And then this beta tab that you see up here on the right, this is actually EA now. So there's a feature that you can turn on in Okta to turn on a more fine-grained policy to allow that particular Autopilot authentication flow to happen. But you can get caught. It's important to point this out to customers and partners, that you do need to enable this feature. Otherwise, you can get caught out and think that it doesn't work. But you need to make sure the right policy is in place, and then it does. So that is how it would work, and I will give you a quick video to show you the demonstration.
Most of us have experience getting a new computer from IT, and for an end user, the work is not that bad. But for the IT team setting it up, it takes a tremendous amount of time and effort, from purchasing the computer, imaging it, configuring it, and testing it, all before it can actually be shipped out to us. Well, that process has gotten a lot simpler with Windows Autopilot. Autopilot allows IT teams to script the entire out-of-the-box experience on a Windows 10 machine without ever even touching it. In fact, computers can be shipped directly to end users, and all they have to do is log in with their O365 credentials. And here's where Okta comes into play. We've created the ability to create a sign-in policy that looks specifically at Autopilot traffic. And using MFA, you can choose to secure that Autopilot process, ensuring that the end user signing into that system is the correct person. Check out this demo of Autopilot working together with Okta. First off, we have a Windows 10 machine powering up. And as you can see, it's a new installation of Windows 10. And so this is the out-of-the-box experience. At this point, it'll ask us to sign into our O365 account. So we'll go ahead and enter the email address here and hit next. We now see that because the domain is federated, we've been redirected to Okta during the out-of-the-box experience. So let's go ahead and log into Okta. And in this case, sign-on policy is forcing MFA using Okta Verify. Once that requirement is met, the out-of-the-box experience continues on to the next configuration steps. Which includes the Windows Hello pin setup. We hit OK, and we're done. I'm now presented with my desktop. And just to verify it, let's take a look at the domain settings and the accounts. And you'll see here that the device is already joined to Azure AD. Now let's jump over to Azure AD under Devices, and we'll see our newly set up device. Here you can see that it's associated with our user. Now let's take a look at the sign-on policy. We'll go to our O365 application, and under the sign-on tab, we'll scroll down to the sign-on policies. Here we see at the top of the list of policies, it's a policy for Autopilot. Since it's at the top, it takes precedence over all the other policies, such as device trust. If we open up that policy, we'll see that that policy applies to anyone logging in from that application, from any location, who's using Autopilot. And in this case, we're enforcing MFA per session. The beta is available now directly from the Okta admin UI. Simply go to the feature manager under settings, scroll down to the open beta section, and enable Windows Autopilot enrollment policy.
Thanks, James from San Francisco. So yes, absolutely possible. That policy is actually, there's another one, so they've got a different variant of that one. That's the one that's in early access, so that early access one can be applied to production tenants. So if anybody needs that at all, just give me a shout and I'll get that to them. Another rest, so you saw an Azure AD only join there, but we support the hybrid join as well. So both use cases work when Okta's involved, when the Office 365 tenant is federated to Okta. You saw the Windows Hello for Business enrollment there. That is something that you saw worked in the demonstration, but it also needs another feature. So Windows Hello for Business enrollment is a secure enrollment process, and that means that Microsoft mandates an MFA be used as part of that enrollment. So it wants to make sure that you're absolutely sure that you are the user that's registering for that secure factor, which is completely fair enough. And when Okta's federated, when Office 365 federated to Okta, Okta needs to handle that. So there is another feature that you need to enable. It's something along the lines of pass MFA claim to Office 365, something along those lines, the feature. But then once that's enabled, then that flow works as well. So that is Windows Hello. As part of that, or this is the kind of new device functionality that I mentioned coming out at the end of the year. We're going to give you some ability to have some device visibility within your system. In essence, Device Trust 2.0, as we call it, will have two statuses. One is a registered device where we've deployed Okta Verify to that device, be that a mobile device, be that Windows, be that Mac. So we've got variants of Okta Verify for all of those. So that gives you a registered status, and you can use that registered status within your policy. So determine whether or not they use a password and an MFA, or some other variation thereof. And then the second part of that is that you can add device management onto that. So that could be Intune device management, or it could be VMware Work device management, whatever the case. So you can build policies around those two statuses. So you can have a policy for registered, or you can have policies for registered and managed devices. And this is see a few zero trust questions coming through. And this is part of what helps you build up those zero trust strategies. Once you've got that information about the devices, whether they're managed and secure, the people that are using them, then you can start to build stronger policies to make sure that your your applications, wherever they are being accessed securely by people. FastPass is is kind of integrated with that capability, but also it adds other features like single sign-on, particularly relevant on the mobile device where it's not where it's a little bit different already because of containerization in the mobile. It makes it a bit trickier to share SSO sessions, but this they've come up with this capability where it makes it a lot more seamless to do SSO on mobile devices. So there are some, I do have a video actually where you'll see a bit more about that. So I've got a video, sort of a marketing video, to give you the rundown of what you can do, and then a quick demonstration as well. Oh no, go back. Okay.
Let's be honest, passwords are going out of style, and for good reason. A password is usually something you have to remember, yet we're constantly being prompted to make them more and more unmemorable. Your users need a password to access their work apps, but they often resort to reusing the same insecure passwords across multiple accounts, both corporate and personal. It's no wonder passwords have become one of the most common sources for identity attacks and data breaches. The bottom line is that asking users to keep track of passwords is neither sustainable nor secure. Luckily, there's a better solution with Okta FastPass. With FastPass, your users will get a seamless, secure passwordless experience across all devices, browsers, and applications. It starts with the user leveraging the Okta Verify app to register their device to Okta's Universal Directory. This establishes a trusted user and device pairing in the Okta Identity Cloud, allowing users to use biometric features like Touch ID or Windows Hello to log into their device. From there, they get instant access to all of their applications without being prompted for additional credentials. Once a device is registered, IT admins can enforce security policies across all platforms to ensure device logins are secure. With a secure and intuitive user experience and improved visibility and control for IT, Okta FastPass helps us to do what we've always wanted to do with passwords. Forget about them entirely. Visit okta.com to learn more.
And then to show you the Windows experience, one final very quick video. So in this video, we're going to open up Salesforce, I believe. It hasn't worked according to plan. Let me take you to the right spot. I think it was 14 minutes. No, that looks all right. So he's going to hit, this is an SP initiated application. So hit the application, redirects to Okta. Okta's verifying that this is a registered device, Okta Verify is deployed, and 2, that it's a managed device, i.e. this is managed by Workforce One. And then it lets you in. No factors or no passwords required. So that's another way, as you can tell, of achieving desktop SSO through this new FastPass technology, or FastPass component. And then you can see that the username will match up and it's true SSO into those type of applications. So that's the desktop experience there. And yes, a few more topics to cover, a bit of race through them quickly. So yeah, we do offer wide varieties of use cases. So not just the workforce, but also customers. And we cater for both of these use cases across the public sector. So yes, address every identity use cases, whether the whether the application's on-prem or in the cloud. The infrastructure is, we're independent of the infrastructure really, whether the APIs are public or private, across any types of users. Okta caters for those. We work very well with domain complexity, so whether the domains are cloud-based domains or complex Active Directory domain architectures, Okta supports those use cases very, very well. And then finally, more advanced lifecycle management use cases. So this is where James is going to take you through some workflows quickly. It's an advanced LCM feature of Okta.
Thanks, Mark. So I appreciate we've gone over a little bit on time, or we're going to probably go about 5 minutes over. I hope that's all okay with you, and I promise you this is really interesting stuff, so it will be great to have you still listening in on what's going on here. So what I'm going to be taking you through now is workflows. Workflows is a solution offered by Okta, which, as Mark said, is advanced lifecycle management. So to give you an idea of what Okta does around lifecycle management, you can see a slide here around how it covers that whole JML process. So the JML process includes the ability to use those existing directories you may already have, whether that be your Azure AD or Active Directory, using those groups that you already have existing in those to assign applications to your end users. What we can do in that JML process is make sure that we provide the correct level of access to all of our end users, whether this be the applications they need to access on a day-to-day basis, or potentially putting in a control mechanism for giving temporary access on a basis, or even giving a user the ability to request access to an application through the request portal inside of Okta. Now, as you can see here, we're giving you an example around Box. The same applies for Office 365, whether that be inside there as well. Now, when we take it to that next stage, kind of workforce, or shall we say not workforce, lifecycle management on steroids, this is where we come to advanced lifecycle management with that workflows capability involved. Now, workflows does provide you that added capability around providing logic and also giving the ability to apply actions or timing onto it as well. Now, by doing so, we're doing all of this additional logic and timing without the need to have any code. So this is a complete no-code approach. This gives us the ability to apply other actions involved in that lifecycle management process, whereby we can apply logic and actions to when we actually provide access to an application to our end users. Maybe this could be the case that we want to check certain attributes applied to our end users, making sure that they are who they are and we are giving the correct access that is required. Now, that's the logic involved, but also there's the capability of the provisioning aspect. We can be much more granular when it comes to this lifecycle management, so we can apply or give them access to maybe certain specific things inside of that application. For instance, in Office 365, we have the capability of applying certain things such as updating groups and giving them group access inside of our Office 365 tenant. It can even be that we want to apply or give them access to certain file shares or folder shares, dependent on the attributes involved in that logic that we incorporated in that workflow earlier. It may even be that we want to have more granular controls around when they can have access to it. Could be that we only want them to have access for a certain time period while their colleague is on holiday. These are all actions that we can complete within our advanced lifecycle management or workflow solution found in the Okta portfolio. Now, when we go into a bit more detail and bring this back into why we're here today, talking around that Microsoft aspect and how we actually collaborate with them and give you that additional capability on top of what they already provide, this is essentially how workflows works. If you're familiar with the mobile application, if this then that, this is essentially following that same principle of when a certain event happens, we are going to initiate a function. So in this example here, we can see when an Okta assigns a user to Office 365, we may be looking at other attributes involved in this process on that particular user. It could be attributes that we have stored in Azure Active Directory or in our AD as well. So therefore incorporating these into the workflow to determine further actions down the line inside of this workflow. So as you can see here, bringing it back in, when this happens, the event of assigning a user to Office 365, we're going to use the if this functionality or function here where their office location is. So if they're based in Europe, we're then going to apply another action here where we can actually create a user in Office 365. So applying that logic there to ensure that we are giving the right access to the correct users. And then you can see that we have other actions here available to us. So do this, then do that. We can then add this user to the Europe security group. So we can be much more granular with the activities that we actually complete within our applications at the same time as having that logic and those conditions at the very start without the need to actually create any code or any scripts involved.
And we have, just to add, James, we have a custom API card within Workflows, which is connected to the Graph API, and we can use Graph 2 as well. So essentially, we can do anything that's exposed through Graph 2 within Office 365 using Workflows.
Exactly that. So that's also something which, if we had more time today, I could have shown a video around that custom API card. But as Mark said, using that Graph API, we can complete any action available within that API alongside those Microsoft-based solutions. But of course, I didn't want to just emphasize the ability to integrate just with Microsoft. Of course, we will be coming back to this in a little bit more detail in a second. We also integrate with other applications out there, such as Salesforce or any other application you can think of within the Okta integration network. Generally have that capability of integrating with it, but also inside Workflows, we can have those custom integrations created via the custom API card as well. So coming back to what Mark said a second ago, if it has an API, we can integrate with it and do those actions within those applications for you as well, without the need to actually have any code. Now, I know we're kind of short of time here, but I did want to bring in a bit more detail around what Workflows looks like and the other capabilities around it too. There is the ability to have, as you can see here, the no-code approach. So it is a drag and drop system with those different cards and those different attributes. We can then bring these into the different stages of the workflow to allow us to have that more granular activity within those applications. Now you can see in the center there, the pre-built connectors available to us. Office 365 is one that is available to us, whether it be the mail or the administration side of it, allowing us to complete those much more granular tasks, such as adding people to groups or maybe removing group memberships. At the same time, we also provide further capability around guest membership as well. So we do have the ability to create guest accounts out of the box with Workflows. And as you may know, guest accounts do not use your license count within your Office 365 tenant. Therefore, with this, we can show you, or actually provide you, the capability of creating temporary accounts for your guest users and assigning them a guest account, which then gives them that capability that you want to provide within your tenant. These are actions out of the box, as I said earlier, using the Office 365 admin pre-built connection. Unfortunately, today we haven't got time to actually show you how this capability works, but if it is something you would like to see more details on in a later session, this is something that can be arranged, and we can show you how those guest accounts can be provisioned very easily and very quickly for those end users, with invites and the information around that account distributed to your end users, automated as well. Then bringing this back together, passing over to Mark. Sorry.
That's okay. Just to wrap up very quickly, I hope you can tell from the webinar that we can do a lot of good stuff together. So advanced lifecycle management features, a lot of single sign-on capability, basically rapid delivery as well is something that you can achieve with the combination together. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. So as we have slightly overrun, I'm going to make a suggestion about the Q&A slot. The box is still open, so do feel free to chuck any questions our way, and we'll keep it open for a moment after we wrap up as well. However, what I will suggest is that we'll take those questions away, get those answered for you, and include that as part of the follow-up, which we'll send you out shortly, which will include a link to the recording of the webinar as well. So as I say, do use the question box. Feel free to submit anything you want to now. We'll get those answered. Alternatively, of course, I'm always available to reach out to toby.noble@bytes.co.uk. You can also reach out to your account manager, of course, or tell me more at bytes.co.uk. Any one of us, any one of those options will be more than happy to help further the discussion for you. But I hope you found today very useful. Thank you very much to all of the speakers, always appreciated. And I wish you all a fantastic end to your week.